very stimulating intellectual discussion on something that at least I don't understand fully, so I hope that I will be wiser by the time I leave this room in the evening. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is a joint endeavor with IT for Change, Internet Freedom Foundation, and of course Bharat Krishak Samaj. So there itself you can see the connect between farmers and IT experts, people who are experts in their own domain. The idea behind this is to discuss the whole AgriStack idea concept, idea as an abbreviation, which has been in the discussion level for quite some time. The Ministry of Agriculture had put out a discussion paper. So typically what Bharat Krishak Samaj does, and it has been doing it at least for the last 4 or 5 years, is to bring different voices to the same room and have disagreements. But in the process of that disagreement, we also found that on many things we agree. So it's important to have this dialogue and clear doubts and understand the whole issue behind what we are trying to do. In fact, it's very often we have seen that when people assemble, in fact, we had a seminar yesterday on the very controversial farm laws and is there a way forward? And we found that there were more agreements than disagreements on the way forward. So it's possible to have very civilized conversations around issues and take care of the concerns that people have, some of it because they don't understand, some of it because there are some apprehensions which are probably not necessarily not true, and some genuine concerns which need to be addressed. So this is the whole background of this seminar. And of course, we do all agree that digitization is a reality and a necessity. How do you take it forward with all stakeholders to have some stake in that process seems to be the challenge. So it's not really the intention or the idea that's a problem. The problem seems to be the design and the process. In fact, I was talking to my friends from NEML a couple of minutes back. When I was chairing the NDDB, we did something called ENAF, which is a digital architecture which captures the details of animals. ENAF succeeded primarily on 2 counts. One, that we had put down on the ground a large number of women, and I emphasize women, in the village who had done roughly about class 10, given them a laptop, trained them how to put data on that laptop, largely about the cow, its feed, its milk yield, its size, weight, etc. And the result that the farmer got was a balanced ration module for the farmer, which we designed to do 2 things. One, maximize local natural material available as feed and reduce costs. Now, when they saw that they can use more natural materials in the village and have a reduction in their cost, it became an instant success. It didn't matter who owned the data and where it was, etc., but they found value in putting the correct amount of data into that system. And I believe that any design of that system should follow these 2 fundamentals. What is in it for me, whose data is being used? I think with that, I will request Mr. Siraj Hussain, my illustrious colleague and my successor in the Agriculture Ministry, to take on the first session, Scope of Idea and AgriStack. Siraj, you will call the panelists. Siraj, you will request all the other panelists to join you.
Thank you, sir. And good morning, everyone. May I now request Ms. Warik, my dear friend Mr. Rajiv Chawla, Mr. Atul Chura from AgriBazaar, and Mr. Rohin Garg from IFF. Okay, please switch off your phones or put it on in silent mode. Thank you, sir, for a good introduction about this workshop. We all know that information technology has touched almost everyone's life in some ways or the other. Even though the main objective of demonetization to eradicate black money may have failed for a variety of reasons, but there is no doubt that it facilitated the use of information technology in our lives. I am happy that Mr. Rajiv Chawla is here, and we will begin today's session with him, because he is the one who brought use of information technology to rural economy much before the use of IT, the importance of use of IT was discussed or even realized by the governments. So he has been involved with the Bhumi project of Karnataka for a long time, and after that the Ministry of Rural Development in the Union government also started a scheme for digitization of land records. And as far as I know, most states have successfully digitized the land records. He will explain, I request him to explain what is it that has been done and what is it that has not been done in the digitization of land records. There are some finer points which are not very adequately understood. I'm sure you guys know, but many people do not know what is still missing in the digitization of land records. So we will begin with him. I request him to explain, give the background of Bhumi project and how does it relate to the digitalization of agriculture, which has now been taken up by the Ministry of Agriculture, and what role does he see for the current project, about which there are many questions which have been asked by people across the spectrum, including the farmers' organizations, because there is a great deal of concern about how these records will be kept, what will finally happen to the privacy concerns of the farmers, and what is the possibility of misuse of these records. Also, I will request him, since he is from the Government of India, to explain, because I have not understood, even though I do follow it, how these 10 organizations were selected by the government, and what does the government see as value addition by this project, which is in the pilot stage. So over to you, Mr. Chawla.
So good morning to all. I don't know whether 10 minutes are enough for me to explain these things. I don't want to cross the time limit also. The land records computerization, the way started 25 years back, was at that time people had a problem in understanding what land records digitization itself meant. And therefore we started, now any land will have two components. One is the textual data of the land. Who is the owner? What is the size of the land? What are the crops grown? What are the encumbrances on the land? What are the loans taken by the farmers? Are there tenants on the ground? What is the type of a soil? Is there any kharab land? They call it kharab land, like Nadi, Nala, Pahad, you know. Gomala, Gomala means jahan gaye chalti hai. So these are kharab lands. So the second component of land record is the spatial data. Where is that land? what are the coordinates of that land. So this is typically when we talk about land records. So there are three components. The non-spatial data about the ownership and properties of land. The second, of course, and a very useful in agriculture, is the crop grown on the land. And the third is the spatial data, where the land is. And with this Google, etc., we talk about the GPS coordinates of the land, or what they call as geotagging, geofencing of the land. Now, what was not so difficult was to digitize the non-spatial data. That means, tell me who is the owner of this property. Are there loans on the property? Of course, there has to be a system to be built so that it happens automatically, not in a batch mode. That means processes should be there. Every time a registration of property takes place, the land should be updated. Every time a succession takes place, the land record should be updated. Unfortunately, while 20 years have passed, a couple of states who have not, and I will not take you too much of intricate detail, but the fact remains that there are some states who have not graduated to those granular details where, for example, Maharashtra. Every time a mutation takes place, that means land property changes from A to B. B name comes a little later. Now, what is this later? Sometime it may be a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Now, on the other side, in Karnataka and many other states, like Gujarat, for example, as soon as the property mutates, it shows in the land records itself directly. That means it is a single source of truth. And the best way of single source of truth is that you should invalidate parallel records. I mean, if you have faith on this, then no other record should be there. Now, in Maharashtra and many other states, you have parallel records. So you have paper records, you also have digital records. So this is on the non-spatial data. If somebody wants to know, I have done this work for quite a time. So now the second component is the crop data. Who is growing what? Now Karnataka, for example, has 200 lakh plots, and you multiply 200 lakh by 30, you get 60 crore plots. What is a plot? A land owned by a person. If he owns 3 lands, it is 3 plots. Now, how do you go to 200 lakh plots? 10,000 village officials, can they go to 200 lakh plots? And why will they go? I mean, why? What is the excitement for them to go? And therefore, in most of the part in the country, I would say more than 90%, or maybe 95%, you don't maintain land records. You just write something, because you have to write. But if you see the data, there would be, you will understand somebody is cut, copying, pasting. Thanks to Microsoft, you have Control-C, Control-V, you do that. Now the third, more difficult component is to have digital spatial data. How do you do that? 200 lakh plots again. How do you reach out to this plot? And before you are reaching out to this plot, what is more important is that you first draw the lines on the ground. I mean, digitization happens after you draw the line. Digitization, you first say who is where. So every time a mutation takes place by way of division of property, a farmer sells half an acre out of 2 acres, somebody has to draw the line there. Saying, so he says, मैंने आधा एकड़ बेच दिया, पर कौन सा आधा एकड़ बेचा? So the land record system is not so good, except Karnataka, where we have a concept of what is called pre-mutation sketch. What is a pre-mutation sketch? I mean, if one looks at it logically, very simple thing. Before you sell, tell me where the land is. So there are what is called licensed surveyors now for 15 years. So this concept was put in place in 2007 or 8, saying that if you want to sell your land, government has appointed licensed surveyors. Please get a plot sketch made, draw a line between the bigger plot, and both the parties should sign, that is buyer and seller. And what government does is to just implement that. After all, it is your land. Why the hell I should bother about? So if you are drawing a line, you are drawing a line. We will only ensure that it is indeed half an acre. But spatially it is rightly located or not, I don't know. It is between both of you. Unfortunately, except in Karnataka, 1 or 2 states tried, but even today, after 15 years, we don't know, we don't have a concept for dividing where your land is. So the land record on the non-spatial side talks about where your property is, but on the spatial side, it is not known where that property in the ground is. Does it get updated? The answer is yes, it gets updated, but it takes too much of time. Sometimes 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and on demand basis. If a farmer makes noise, then somebody goes, the surveyor there, and does the survey there and says this is the line as per the field. Now, once you have these lines, then somebody has to digitize those property records. So those digitization of spatial data has still not happened in many places. In fact, in most of the places. So then, of course, the next component is georeferencing these properties. That means if you digitize these properties spatially, that is done on a sheet of paper. Now I have to georeference. That means like a Google, I should be able to reach a property. So these are the components involved, and as I said, georeferencing and I'm going into a little detail, pardon me for that. If you georeference a village map, what is village map? A consolidation of all properties. Village maps have been georeferenced in 4 or 5 states, which is a very good news, but remaining states have to still do the village map georeferencing, although they have the village map. Now, village map may not have all the parcels, but how does it matter? If I have a bigger parcel, I know there somewhere there inside is this person also sitting. So for our agriculture purpose, even if we georeference the village maps, that is enough. So this is the background of land records. I'm sorry, I would have taken 5 minutes in explaining, and I'm sure it will not be very clear to people. What Mr. Jakhar told me was to talk about 3-4 components, and I thought I'll finish that first. Why is, what is this digitization? Idea, as you know, is for digitization, right? India digital ecosystem for agriculture. Now the ecosystem basically would mean the government and the private sector. The government cannot deliver all the services, and therefore private sector will have to step in. And I'll come to the issues with the private sector. People like Mr. Jakhar and others would talk more about it. I would only talk from a government point of view. But what is important is that if you want to have an ecosystem, the least you have to, what is that? So who will drive this ecosystem? Obviously the data and the policies would drive this ecosystem. And what is this data? Now the data is a huge data, but the basic data which government has to provide is the land record on the non-spatial side, on the spatial side, and the crop details, which is the bounden responsibility of the government. They need to provide. They cannot wriggle out of this. But once you do this and you provide this data, then there are many other data which should become part of this ecosystem. For example, the satellite data. How is the crop data, NDVI indexes, crop satellite data showing? What about the soil health data? What about the water stress data, right? And then what about the weather data? What about mandis data? Whatever arrivals, costs in the mandis, right? What about warehouse details? The capacity available in warehouse. Now these all together will become the global data on the top of which the idea framework will sit. Most of the data would come from government, but the core data with which you can start, as I submit to you, is the crop, the spatial maps, and the ownership details. But of course, the other data would equally be required. Now, one very important thing which my senior spoke was, and the other officer spoke, was about the privacy of this data. And therefore, government will have to put in place a consent framework. How do you share data? You have ROR data, record of rights. I must tell you, the ROR and map, sir, I'll take 5 more minutes. I mean, you have told me 2-3 things to explain. So the ROR is in public domain. So you can go to any website and download records. But can I give this data in a more organized manner, digitally, without the consent of the farmer? Now, this is a question which I think all of you will have to debate. I can tell you that there are plus and minus of this. When you give a API-based electronic data where you can download hundreds and thousands of records electronically, it is different from scraping a website and getting one record at the same at one time. Can I give it without farmers' consent? Can I create a consent framework? The answer is big yes. So there is already a consent framework which Karnataka has put in place. Now, will farmers know how to give consent? So when Big Bazaar or Agri Bazaar or NEML wants a data of a farmer, and why does he need a data? Today, Karnataka is in a position to say, I was telling sir yesterday, that if you want to know that I want 100 tons of tomato in the month of June within 50 kilometers of Karnataka, can you give me this data? And thankfully, Karnataka is in a position to give this data. So it runs a query because it has a spatial data. It also knows the crop, and I'll explain later if somebody is interested in finding out how is the crop found in real time. And I know their farmers' coordinates, farmers' phone number, farmer details, so I can give this data. Not therefore AgriBazaar and all these Ninja Cart, etc. will be very excited. But can I give their farmers data? What if farmers today ask me, 8,000 of these farmers who have grown tomatoes within 50 kilometers of Bangalore and are graduating, getting harvested in June, can I give their data? Now, if you say that you can't give their data without asking them, then I will send a message saying Ninja Cart wants this data electronically. Or there will be a mobile app on which if they open, they will see a request. How many of them will understand this? And if they don't understand, can I give the data? And we have seen the consequences of what can happen with very innocuous things. I mean, this data is always in public domain, but it is not in this bulk way. So I can today collect that data one by one, but can I collect 10,000 farmers in one shot? The answer is no, unless you have electronic mechanism. So the consent sharing mechanism will have to be put, but what is more important is that somebody will have to operate that. That means the farmers will have to work on that. And will they graduate to that level is a question which somebody will have to answer. You will also have to have a data exchange platform because this is consent data. You will have other type of data, weather data, this data, somebody has some data, other person has some other data, somebody has the crop health data. So the data exchange platform will have to be built, which is much easier to build. You will have to build a sandbox also so that people can, once I expose this data, people can try their technology. Much easier again, people like us know how to do this. Three more things here. The capacity building of the farmers and government employees is something which will be very critical. How do you tell farmers what is there in idea for them? How do they use the data? So the capacity building of the farmers and government employees will be very, very important. And then, of course, two other things which are important. One is commercialization of this data. The moment you have this data, there has to be an equitable access to all the private entities. You have to have democracy in sharing of this data. You can't favor people. We heard about UPI and some people, early starters, I'll not name them, there were lots of controversies. Idea should not get besieged by these controversies that somebody enters into the sandbox earlier, and although it's not so easy because finally you have to reach farmers, it's not so easy, but then one will have to understand that there will have to be a democracy in sharing of this data. The data should be, of course, as I said, should be shared with the consent of the farmer. Data cannot be used for other purpose. Now, this is another thing which is important. One entity sharing the data with another entity. All these things will become important. Then, the data is the power. People should not misuse it. And then, of course, who are the entities who should be allowed to use this data? So there will have to be a mechanism for shortlisting of these entities. Should government do this? Then there would be favoritism again. What if I share this data with some organization which is not of good repute and they do something? Now this something is unknown now. And maybe people may say, many people criticize me saying, you are unnecessarily being defensive. Now, if we give this data and organizations who are giving advisory, let us say, turns out to give a wrong advisory, would government be blamed? Now, people say there is education in the private sector and nobody regulates it. Why the hell you want to regulate this? But the fact remains here that we are sharing that data. And because we are sharing that data, should we regulate? And are we capable of regulating? So they say we have IoT, we have AIs, MLs, all type of languages used, and this is the advisory which is correct. And the advisory is used by the farmer because we have shared the data. They will say affiliated with Government of India, consented by government, some language they will use. And the farmer will then think this pest is coming, and if the pest doesn't come, then the farmer loses. And then apart from the organization who is getting into disrepute, will government get into disrepute? That's something which we'll have to, so should we regulate? Are we capable of regulating? Or should we just go away? If we go away, we are sharing the data. Will we get involved indirectly? So that's the second question. I come to the last point now on how will this database be created? I'm talking about the core data, because once the core is created, other databases will plug into, they will be sucked into the system. And the core database, as I submitted to you, Government of India will have to keep in mind that they should not centralize. We'll have to motivate each state. Now, will they like some of the states may not like to? So what structure you have so that all states get involved? They all feel that it is their data and it's not Government of India's data. So these are some of the issues which I thought I would bring to your attention. The work has started. Shortly you will see some conference of all the states where we will push this. But the good point is Karnataka has already done, so there is no rocket science. It has been demonstrated that all these concepts are possible. But then, of course, there are lots of challenges, people misinterpreting what is happening, government employees misinterpreting the data which is created, and the data being misused. So we'll have to be careful when we do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Excellent. You have given an excellent background, and I'm sure that with this beginning, we can go to Ms. Wadik, who can give, what does World Economic Forum see in this?
Sure, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chawla. I think you set the context, and I'm happy to cede some of my time to that context setting. Let me tell you a little bit about the World Economic Forum. It's been decades of being a public-private organization in the sense that we bring different stakeholders to the table to talk about issues that could potentially improve the state of the world. That's also our motto. The World Economic Forum deals in three things. One is insight. So a lot of the information that is in this room that provides insight into how we should function and what we should do. That's something that we delve into, and that's something we bring to the fore. The second part of what we do is interactions. So I like to describe it as, think of us as connector of dots. We find the dots, we connect the lines, and then we go out and search for more dots. The idea is to create a network of people who are then able to speak to some of these challenges. And the final one is impact. So a lot of what we do is related to creating impact, co-creating positive impact, a lot of co-creation involved. But impact remains one of the things that we focus on, because without that, a lot of the work that we do would not have meaning. On the technology piece, and a lot of the work that my colleagues have actually done on technology, and we have a Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution based in Mumbai. They've done a lot of work with Mr. Chawla, with Mr. Agarwal, who was erstwhile Additional Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. A lot of the states, including Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, etc., has been focused on digitalization in agriculture. And the mission that has just been recently launched in the union budget, which is looking to elevate public-private partnerships in advancing digitalization in agriculture, that's something that we're working very closely with the Department of Agriculture, because that's something we truly believe is going to lay the foundation and the pathways for a responsible journey into digitalization in this field. Having said that, I think I should mention that at the forum, we look at technology as a complementary tool. The focus has always been on innovation more than on technology, and of course, technology is only one of the many ways that you have innovation that's present. We look at technology as complementary, so a removal of inefficiencies rather than the end-all goal of what we want to do. It is one of the ways that we think we can solve for scale, because with a big organization and of course globally, if you look at everything that's going on, it is very difficult for us to stay within our ambition of just some borders. It has to be across, it has to be interoperability, it has to be learning exchanges, knowledge exchanges that allow for multiple countries to come up in a way that is possible. So technology from America is not always going to be applicable to India, but technology from India is probably going to be applicable to Indonesia or one of the other states on this side of the world. So the idea of this knowledge exchange becomes equally important. It can't all be coming from the West, so we have to build our own capability on this. We are looking at emerging technology to solve for this, so Internet of Things, et cetera, that we've already discussed today. And finally, I think what's important is we need to, the way that we look at public-private partnerships is that there are boats that are in the water and we just raise the level. So we raise the bar of how business is done. It isn't one over the other. It's everybody coming together and forming frameworks that allow for everybody to prosper. So that's a little bit about the World Economic Forum and how we look at technology in digitalization in agriculture. I think the problem of responsible use of data that Mr. Chawla also mentioned when you're talking about land records or others, the usability of it, how it's being collected, what is the accuracy of it, is it complete, is it data we can use? That is a challenge we haven't really been able to solve. But there are agtech companies out there today that are doing it. At the forum, we try and bring these agtech companies to a platform where they can talk about the kind of solutions that they have. But how validated are these solutions? For example, one of the companies that we work with, Satshore, claims that they have been able to extend loans to 2 million farmers because of their technology that involves what Sir was talking about in terms of geospatial mapping, right? There are other organizations, one being AgNext, that is now looking at quality parameters for the produce through spectrometers that allow for better prices for farmers. There are even others where innovation is more at the forefront rather than technology. So there's Animal, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, where you're looking at farmers who want to purchase livestock coming and actually, how do you do it right now? It's very difficult. If I want a cow that is in Gujarat and I'm sitting in Hisar, the idea that I can just be like, okay, please send over this cow, and I'd like this geared cow for my farming purposes, it's very difficult to do. You don't know what you're getting. So there is a platform now that allows for these farmers to go and spend 10 days with these livestock that they want to then purchase and bring back to their farms. Efficiencies in agriculture is what is the purpose of digitalization. I think what I can now go on to is also just talking in terms of India and globally how we're working on the platform for data. The data problem isn't one that has been solved by anybody yet. And what we're really looking at is consent-based and purpose-led data sharing. Mr. Chawla already mentioned that. There's a lot of data available out there, and often when I was working with a lot of the other foundations, if the data is there, let's just collect it all. But it's not purpose-driven. And consent has just recently become popularized. So how do you protect the interests of the farmer, protect the privacy, but also only collect that amount of data that is actually going to be useful in making decisions, and of course, for bringing forward the entire agriculture space. So that's definitely one of the pieces there. I think in terms of what we are doing with the Department of Agriculture, we are using the public-private partnership model to create the framework to be able to use data in a way that is, consent-based as well as purpose-driven. That's going to take some time. Like I said, nobody's really figured out this issue. So it isn't going to be a one-night miracle that you're going to see that, oh yes, this is the way that we're sharing data and everybody's happy. That's not going to happen. And I think Mr. Chawla also referenced that. And finally, globally, we work on data for a common purpose platform. This is a global issue. Data is a global issue. How we use it, the privacy of it, the commercialization, the incentivization, all of these issues need to come, we need to come together to solve this problem. It isn't going to, as I said, it's not an overnight solution. So I think what would be most effective in a space like this is to be patient while also being concerned about how these frameworks are being formed and how we are using them and how we want to move them further. I'm going to leave the rest of my time and give it back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wadik. Thank you very much for giving an overview. Now I go to Mr. Atul Chura of AgriBazaar, which is one of the 10 companies shortlisted by the Government of India who will be given data. So you may like to explain and remove the doubts in the minds of the people about how AgriBazaar and other companies were selected. What did you tell the government that you were selected and not anybody else? And what are you going to do with this data? How are you going to bring value to the farmers?
Sure, thank you and good morning to all, and it's a pleasure and honor to be here on this platform. I am Atul and I represent Star AgriBazaar, and AgriBazaar we started in 2016. It's an initiative of Star Agri Group. We have been primarily into post-harvest management services, having a network of warehouses and offering warehouse receipt-based finance to various depositors. So objective of starting AgriBazaar was to digitalize this agri trading, the post-harvest trading of agri commodities, which is happening in a traditional way, commodities exchanging hand between farmers and traders and processors, and even government buying and selling commodities. So the objective was to, if we can create a digital ecosystem which can replicate how traditionally the commodity trade, which is a highly risk-prone business, is done, and can it enlarge the focus of, enlarge the scope of trading between the two entities, which is currently largely based on the relationships and past experience. So how can we make this a vast network and digitalize agriculture? So in last year, when coming up to how we get to sign this MOU was that 2 years back, we have been working a lot with the Agri Ministry on different projects, and we got to know that there is some standardization of data which is happening. We did a small pilot also, and when we came to know that there were MOUs which are being happening, I think the Microsoft, the first time which happened, and we got to know from the media. So we approached the government with a proposal saying that we want to contribute to this objective, because what we really feel is that there is a lot of companies and there are a lot of initiatives that can be taken using the technology. But the challenge that happens is that, one, that how impactful or how accurate the technology deduced analysis are, and secondly, how do we reach out to the farmers has been a major challenge. And that is where these digital technologies are still at a very nascent stage when it comes to farmers adopting or companies approaching with these digital technologies. So when with the concept idea, we thought, we proposed that we will be doing this pilot in about 3 blocks, and 1 block each in state of Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh. And at that block level, we will be looking at how we can use this information which we get from AgriStack, and how this data which we get from AgriStack can be sanitized and integrated with the data which is available at the state at different levels, not only the land records, but other details at the state which is there. How can this data be integrated, sanitized, and then made into a good database? So that was the first step. Second was to that what can be done with this data. So for what can be done with this data, we took a challenge that if we have this data, if we know exactly the spatial details of a farmer, if we know where his farmland is, and if we know the details of the farmers and the scheme data that we have got, so there is a possibility to offer a location-based services, which was one of the major focus areas in the idea document also. So by knowing the farmer's location, the geography of his land, so we propose to offer 4 kind of services. One, to give a market linkages services. Second, to help him secure agri inputs and maybe rationalize his spend on agri inputs and source it directly and in some more efficient way. Third was to give some location-based high-end advisory services to the farmers. And fourth was that whether this information can be used to help farmers secure finance from the banks or from the regulated channel at a much lesser rate of interest. So these were the 4 broad objectives. And with these objectives, the third intent that we have for this MOU is that what can be the delivery mechanism? How do we reach out to the farmers? Now we have got the data. Maybe we have also got some solutions that what can be done with this data. So third is on the delivery mechanism, that how we give this information to the farmer. And this delivery mechanism also have 3 components. One, which is the validation, that whatever we have got this data, is it helpful for the farmers or not? Is it accurate or not? And our farmers really need that information, and can that be delivered in the most efficient way to these to farmers or not? So with these 3 objectives, we started with the MOU activities in these 3 blocks. Currently, we are at different stage of implementation at different blocks, but first learning that we had was that the 3 states, they all have very different ways of collecting this data. And though all these 3 states are in northern belt, Hindi speaking states, maybe also using Hindi language for most of the record keeping, but the mechanism of recording data, the terminologies, the data structures were very different for both these states. And secondly, even the extent of data which was available with the states was at a very different level. So all these 3 states, we had 3 different experiences, and it gave us a perspective of how different kind of data and formats are there. And maybe by end of this MOU, we'll be able to help IDEA in having some kind of a policy framework or a system framework, that how do we structure this database, which largely encapsulates the different formats which are being followed, at least by these 3 states that we have been working with. So by getting this database, the first thing that we did was we linked these spatial records that we got from one of the state with the satellite data. And then we had an army of people on the ground which went there. We did some sample surveys, we collected soil information, we collected crop information, we collected crop health information. And the objective was, if we can start creating a dashboard where, on one single dashboard you can identify the farmland, you can identify the farmers, you can identify what crop he is currently growing, what was the crop that he has grown in the past, what has been the health of the crop, what are the weather and the soil and the moisture parameters of that particular farmland. So this was the first stage where we were integrating the government records, the farmer records, the idea records with satellite records and with remote sensing data, with weather data, with soil data, and create a dashboard which can then become a platform to give services to the farmers, to get them information which can be used by multiple stakeholders. So that was the first step that we did. And again, as I said, we are at a different level of execution in different states, depending upon what is the current status of data collection from the states. So based on, so another thing that we did accordingly, and our strength comes into agri trading. So we have acquired licenses to operate private mandis in the states of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. So based on this, we set up our own centers at some of the warehouses. We established facility to do scientific testing of the commodities for the farmers. Looking at the village-wise mapping of what crop has been grown, we run a lot of campaigns and we educated farmers on that. There's a platform, there's a private e-mandi concept, there is an alternative to the traditional mandis, and we invited them to come to our procurement center to get the commodity tested. We listed their auctions and we attempted to connect them directly to the buyers, which was as per the regulations which are given by the state permitting us to operate these centers. We educated them on the quality, and not to a very great extent because this is the first season, but to some of the farmers we helped them get direct buyers from our these procurement centers. They were given payment the same day, electronically transferred to their bank accounts. Every record was maintained digitally. The details were shared with the mandi board. So we tried and we educate farmers on, there's some alternatives of directly connecting and also educating the buyers specifically that there can be alternate models to mandis and there can be benefits of directly reaching out to the farmer using a digital platform. Then we also we are trying to have skill development with the FPOs. We are doing a project where we are trying to uplift those FPOs and open up their own input shops and create direct linkages with the people. But most importantly, what we have done is we have created a digital map of the soil health, weather, and all the indices that we are done. And right now, we are in a step of validating that data. If we have assessed a soil condition of a farmer, we are doing field surveys to understand how accurate that data is. And on delivery mechanism, we strongly believe that the KVKs and the government has a very strong infrastructure on the ground to reach out to the farmers. And by end of this, we strongly believe that these KVKs or these, the government mechanism, the FPOs, the cooperatives, I think there is a lot of value in giving these tools to these KVKs and the cooperatives, and they can be the medium of reaching out to the farmers and use those technologies and the tools for a better relationship with the farmers and to give a more efficient advisory to the farmers. We also realized that every state government is doing a lot of initiatives, especially when we went to MP. So MP has its own SARA app, which is a very fantastic app where they are updating the farmers, their Girdavari data, the crop they had sown. So I think there are a lot of areas where we can, and the private sector can work with these government entities who are developing these digital technologies, and instead of going with another solution, maybe strengthening these, the government-based initiatives on digital technologies, which will, because they are having a lot of information, the ground staff presence also to collect this data. So these are the various aspects of things we are doing. And finally, on the finance side, we have created a certain digital profile of our farmers. We have been using technology, we have been able to deduce that whether this land of a farmer, was it used for farming or not? What kind of crops he has grown in last 10 seasons? Is he a regular farmer? Is he, what kind of, how much land he is using there? What could be his income from that? So we are creating a financial profile of the farmers, which may be used by the banks and all to give a loan to the farmers over and above the KCC. And to start with, we also have our own NBFCs, and we are tying up with the banks. And in some 2 or 3, we are planning to give a ticket loans to the farmers to the tune of 10,000, 15,000 rupees for a short duration, just based on these reports that we have generated, and then showcase it back to the industry. Hopefully that will help farmers and the banks to, have a product which will enable farmers to secure funds and loans at a lower interest rate. So these are the various initiatives that we are doing, and hopefully that will be adding some value to the government at the end of the MOU.
Thank you. Thank you very much for an overview of what AgriBazaar is doing. I think it is early days, and we will get to know the results of these interventions maybe in about a year's time. Lastly, we come to Mr. Rohin Garg. I think he is from a firm of... Okay, Internet Freedom Foundation. Okay, so you are very important, extremely important, because there is a huge concern about privacy and how these records in digitized forms can be misused by unscrupulous elements. So maybe you would like to inform us how the government should protect the privacy and the rights of farmers and other stakeholders.
Certainly. Thank you. So if you can, I'll speak from here. So as sir said, I think it's fair, as even Mr. Chawla said, there is a need to understand what sort of data regulations we need. But I'll start slightly behind and refer back to the controversial farm laws. And I think, as someone just remarking, the issue, some of the issues there was not that the intention was bad, but that it wasn't conveyed properly and that there wasn't enough dialogue. And I think one issue that we see, especially with digital technology here in agriculture, is that so far, at least in the IDEA process, a similar thing has been followed. When the IDEA consultation paper was put up, I think it was only in English, whereas there was no sort of, and it was a very technical paper that perhaps not many farmers would have understood. And I think the issue there is that sometimes there's this tendency to look at these data things, as someone else said, as a technical issue or as a digital issue. Whereas, for example, with something like the AgriStack, as it's colloquially called, it's an agriculture issue because the aim is to change the sector in a way that will provide significantly higher incomes to farmers. And I think that is something that has been lacking so far. So to that extent, the first step, I think, is that if the government can go directly and interact with farmers, that will be the first wellspring from which we'll actually get, okay, what sort of data regulations, to whatever extent. Of course, digital literacy is low in India, but that, I think, should be one source of input, because they'll tell you, okay, we know broadly what our data is, we're not as technically knowledgeable as the government, but here's what are our core demands. You can then translate them into policies. And I think this then stems further on into the lack of a legal framework. So right now, the data protection bill is pending with Parliament, and it'll come whenever. And I think, as I said, the government does sort of want to understand, how to regulate this data. But the issue is, for example, even with the data protection bill, there are certain key rights that farmers must first understand, be made aware of, and then provided. Because, for example, the right to interoperability is going to be a key part of this platform if it is to succeed. If within this sort of market paradigm, when the farmers need choice, if something like interoperability is not guaranteed as fundamental, that means they can't shift who they're getting their services from. Now, the fact is that, and this is still fledgling in India, but you have places like France, like America, like Australia, where digital agricultural projects have been carried out. And there, one issue that's been encountered is of digital technology lock-in. What that means is that when one sort of technology company or one service provider comes in and sort of enters into an agreement with the farmer, and they have some resentment or some issues, let's say, with that particular agreement, they're unable to change because all the data they've collected they can't get back in interoperable form. So it's things like these, I think, that the government has to look to. For example, to hark back to the data protection bill, there are certain exemptions to the right to interoperability. So I think these are the sort of issues that they'll have to look at. And I don't have to go on about the importance of data, but I was speaking to a journalist, I think in January 21, and I won't take names, but that journalist had been speaking to a small agri-tech startup. And what they'd said was that, given how agricultural market linkages are, given the lack of much margin, where are you making your profit? And they said, look, our idea is simple. We have funding from some VCs. For the next 5 years, that'll keep us afloat. After that, with the data we've collected, we'll sell that to some of the bigger companies and we'll get a return. Now, I think that is something that people have to also be cognizant about, because that data is tremendously valuable. And without giving farmers ownership of their data, I think it will be very tough for farmers to actually receive the benefits of this. So in India, it's obviously not as fleshed out, but like I said, there are other countries that's happened. And there was a survey conducted with American farmers. And here are a couple of things I'd like to quote So what they thought were issues with digital agriculture in America, which obviously has significantly more developed infrastructure. The first one is, of course, lack of transparency about the terms of use in data licenses. Now, in a country that is way more digitally literate than us, to expect farmers to have that sort of knowledge for grievance redressal, I think is something that the government must sort of look at before they go ahead, because otherwise the chances of forget collusion or any sort of malintent there, but any very basic issues will not be able to be solved. For example, under the Swamitva Yojana, which is basically a scheme that uses drones to conduct mapping of, I think, cadastral maps, the lack of a grievance redressal mechanism has meant that a lot of incorrect maps, even if they're through AI, so that's not necessarily some ill intent there, those haven't been able to be corrected. And that has meant a couple of months of, going to various offices without much fruit. So I think the lack of transparency is one big issue. Another issue is, of course, that, as again said, that was put forth in the survey, it's possible actually in today's times to even legally own this data, but still not be in actual control of it, because ownership would have to mean something more comprehensive, which would mean farmers must know what their rights are, what they can do with the data, and who's using it at all points. And so the consent framework will have to sort of go beyond simply a sort of a one-click notification sent on an app to something that actually tells the farmer, okay, when you're giving consent, here's what can go right. As we all know, obviously there are benefits to this. Here's what can go wrong. To what extent do you want to do this? And the right to then withdraw that consent, especially for farmers, must be there. Because otherwise they're not going to be able to, like I said, even if when they own this data, they won't be able to actually exercise their rights over it. The third issue, of course, is the need for legal data rights, which I've already gone through. And the last one, or the second last one, is the inequality in bargaining power, which comes back to my point about things like interoperability and other data rights. Obviously, when a larger agri-tech company will come in and deal with this collection of farmers, the asymmetry in resources and knowledge is obviously going to be an issue. So I think not just sensitization, but actively, education of farmers on this, and of companies about where to draw the line in terms of where they have their agreements, I think will be another key issue. And lastly, I think the main thing, of course, for all these technologies is the fact that they're meant to increase farmers' income. But as farmers from France, America, and Australia, again, just based on initial surveys, have said, they rarely often see these things actually translate into higher incomes. And if I may quote, here's an Australian farmer saying, I just can't see how the benefit is going to get passed to us. When you push it a bit harder, that's the whole supply chain. It's got nothing to do with the farmer. And the point is that I think the linkage where that increased efficiency actually translate back into higher increased incomes to farmers is yet to be figured out, and perhaps should be under discussion. Now, where this leads me to actually is something that was again mentioned, I think, by Mr. Nandakumar earlier, is that, we need markets, but what sort of markets do we need? And I'll throw some data at you, so forgive me if it gets slightly boring. But since around the 1960s, public investment and total investment in agriculture was 42.5. It has then fallen in 39.93. In the 80s, it went up to 45.11, but then after that, post-liberalization, it has fallen and fallen. And as of 2014, I think it was 16.36% of all investment in agriculture. Now, that is one statistic. This has coincided with, and this is all RBI data, this has coincided with a significant indebtedness. So if you see debt to asset ratios for rural households, they've increased from 1.78% to 3.23% between 1992 and 2013. The same period in which public investment in agriculture has fallen, indebtedness has doubled, so to speak. Debt from money lenders, from informal sources, as the government has withdrawn, has also increased. Again, the share of debt from money lenders has gone from 17.5% to 33%, again, double. And additionally, there have also been some studies within India that show the link between long-term fixed capital in long-term agricultural credit and gross capital formation. So when all that is happening, that's when you've seen this sort of environment when farmer incomes have depressed. And so I think to that extent, it's vital that government, as Sir said, the government can't provide also all the services. But there are at least some services which the government, I think, must contain whole, and more importantly, within the ecosystem that's defined for both the government and the private sector, there will have to be terms and conditions that actually favor the farmers. Otherwise, as we said with that farmer, and as other people have also indicated, the fruits of this increased efficiency, which no doubt will come from digital technology, that's why we all want it in this field, will not get passed on to farmers. I'll end here, cede my time, and come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohin, and thank you, Mr. Jakhar, for inviting people from diverse backgrounds so that everyone has a flavor of what is in store. So I fully agree that with Mr. Garg that the benefits of digitization should ultimately flow to farmers, and if that does not happen, then one can say that the promise of bringing so much of IT will not be met. So now we have about 15 minutes for an open house discussion. Please introduce yourself and ask your question. Yes.
Morning, my name is Raman. I'm a follower of technology in agriculture supply chains. My question is actually both to Mr. Chawla and private sector folks on the dais. The benefits of tech in ag have been enumerated quite well, and I think some of them will show up in the next few years. The risk of tech deployment are very real. So, two-part question. One is, what is the thinking in the government of a regulatory mechanism or a regulator that will address the risk or adjudicate or whatever? The second is, if the risk actually lead to failure, where does the responsibility, accountability lie, and what is the mitigation mechanism for that?
And this is what I said in the beginning, that where do you draw that line? Now, when today you are not even, we are not giving any data, for example. You have so many ag techs which are providing services. Do we have to really regulate this sector? Now, when we start building that core databases which I spoke about, and we provide that core database in more organized fashion, obviously ag techs will grow. Now, do we regulate? If we don't regulate and something goes wrong, is the government responsible? And therefore, I think you have a very valid question. What are the liabilities of the ag techs if they give wrong advice? Now, the similar thing happens in education sector, for example. There are so many coaching centers. Now, do you really hold them responsible about what they are teaching? So there are many ag techs which are saying that there is no business of government regulating it, leave it. The people who are also saying now that government is becoming a party to them by providing data, by creating this idea framework, which we have not done in education, for example. Each of the coaching center, many of those people don't even require any help from the government. And then the people who are studying are aware of what they are doing. Here, farmers will not be aware, as he's saying. So I think there is a need that it cannot be as free as people would want, but we will have to be very careful on how much we regulate. As we move forward, I think this regulator will, this concept will become more clear, but nobody can say that we can have free for all, especially with that amount of data, and on the other side, farmers being in a very, very weak position, not understanding the technology, getting swayed by big private sector. So some line will have to be drawn somewhere.
Yeah, sure. So, two things on that. First is, advisory services to the farmers is being given by private sector as on now also, or even by the government sector. We are talking about research institutions, universities. In private sector, the seed companies, fertilizer companies, all of them are reaching out to the farmers and giving them advisory services. And I do not see about any regulation in that, because you are, this regulation comes in the point as if farmers are not forced to follow those advisory. And let us not assume that farmers do not know, much about farming. So it is just an information which is going to the farmers, and it is up to the farmers to trust any source or not, follow any advisory or not. So I think advisory, giving advice to the farmers has been there. Now what technology can do, right now we are assuming that, private tech companies will build on this data and directly reach out to the farmers and make money. But why we are looking at role of the private companies only for reaching out direct to the farmers? If there is a point proven that technology can help farmers, then there can be a lot of PPP arrangements of giving these technology tools to government institutions, to universities, to the KVKs, and then there's a need where there's a tech specialist which comes and looks at the data and looks at the current people who are giving advisory, and that can really and also one of the source of reaching out to the farmers. So I think only assuming that the only model will be that tech companies will directly increase their farmer base and something on that may not be the only way for for the widespread use of technology for the farmers.
Yeah. I don't know, Siraj, to whom I should ask this question, which I'm going to raise. I'm Dinesh Abrol. I retired as Chief Scientist from CSIR NISTATS, and then subsequently I'm at the moment adjunct professor in TRCSS JNU on sustainability studies, agriculture sustainability included. Okay. The question is, whatever tools, assets that are being created, variety of tools and assets that you mentioned, and then you are also beginning to use them because you are owning mandis as well, and direct interfaces under development. So are these assets going to be public assets, or and you have already started using them? Okay, maybe you have a first mover advantage using that particular data analytics or tool assets, whatever contents you have. Is that a fair thing to do? Is there not a conflict of interest? Should this model be at all followed? Regulation comes later. The very act of creation is creating a conflict of interest, and I don't want to use strong words, a lot of problematic is getting built right in the initial condition. Forget about regulation.
Now this is a very important question, that on one side, government is a repository of data. So let's leave it there. Now, the private sector is also creating data through its own processes. They have remote sensing. They are able to sense each property. They have digitized maps available in an analog form. They can digitize that separately without being dependent upon the government and geo-reference. And therefore, like I saw Patanjali in Haridwar, independent of government databases, they have been able, and there's nothing wrong, they have been able to create similar databases of which property, where it is located, whom it is owned by, because all this data is there under RTI, you can, and under land record system, you can buy, of course not through API, but then they create the digital data, and then they put a satellite layer on the top, and they are able to create data. Now this data, some people say, and again there are views on this, some people say, and I don't know to which extent you will go, they say even the satellite data that way belongs to the farmer. After all, it is his farmland. What is growing on his land is his data. Now, I really don't know where do you draw the line. Now, this data is obviously there with the private sector, and they have not taken help of the government till now, because the fact remains that the IDEA framework will have to still create core databases. But in absence of that data, because the data was always there, the IDEA is not going to create data, it's going to restructure the data so that accessibility becomes much more easier. The data is there with the private sector. Now, whether this private sector should be allowed to use that data for themselves only. For example, let's say AgriBazaar or Patanjali or for that matter, anybody else, or they give it back to the government to put it in the common pool so that the others can use. So these questions are very important. The fact today is the data is lying with them, the one who has created, and they're not sharing. Now, what we are saying is that the moment we create this framework and you make use of this and you create some value-added data, you will have liability to share the data back to the government, so that the government should be able to share it with others. And you cannot say that I have created this data by using the data which we gave to you, of course with the consent of the farmer, and we spent a lot of money in digitizing it, a lot of efforts of the government. The data which you created by using that data should come back to the government so it can be democratically shared with the third parties. I'm sure private sector will not very easily agree to that.
You want to say something? Just very quickly. Respectfully, sir, I think with private sector sort of creating these databases, the issue first, of course, is that there's not as much sort of statutory safeguards. But more than that, I think something much more concrete. So the first MOU that came up was, I think, Microsoft. And there was an RTI file that also provided us with an SOP. And basically what it said was that, as I mentioned, many states have parallel land records. And so they would have these field survey teams from Microsoft, not from the government, if I remember correctly. And the guidelines in that SOP said that in case there's a mismatch, the data will have to be 100% reconciled. Now that, to me, those two words are very important, because what we're saying is that Microsoft, as a private entity, is making that decision as to what is the separation of someone's land or what is the issue, and they are the ones then arbitrating that. And I think that is something that even suppose that this MOU goes okay, is bound to have deleterious consequences later. And I think with the example of these databases, for example, let's take the satellite layer data. There is obviously, say, some amount of value creation when the private sector comes in, flies a satellite and gets that data. No one can dispute that. But the issue is then that of a fee versus ownership. So if you can actually implement a system, whereas the legal rights and therefore the right to draw revenue from that data is of the farmers, and the private sector then gets a fee instead of control over that data, I think that's what will then mean, that's what will actually help farmers. Because if the private sector gets first control over that data, that then means that the people, again, who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of it, will not have the most control. I'll stop there.
So just wanted to clarify one thing. So MOU doesn't really, I think, so one lesson from here is that we should tell more about this MOUs to others so that they know what are we doing. And I give him complete marks even if somewhere factually is not very much correct, because we have not disclosed that. Now, fact remains that we have given data. The Microsoft, or for that matter, any partner in future will have a right to do their validation for their purpose. For their purpose. They don't tell us what is wrong, what is right. I am saying this is the data, and if they want to do some checks on that, of course they should do. After all, they're going to invest on their data. So they have a right to invest on their data, correct it for themselves, for their purpose, but not telling us what is wrong, what is right. So I think we'll have to clarify. And the second point I think is very important, sir, that you create data, you should allow others to use this data. Otherwise, every organization is creating the same set of data. And then, of course, where is the farmer? So you start exploiting or using that data, but not sharing it back with the government so that it can be shared with others. So I think that's something which is a challenge. Of course, fees, etc. is one way, but I'm saying that data which is created by satellite data, the health of a crop. So there is a health of a crop. Now we come to know that there is a problem, that there is a pest going to come. Don't you think government should know this? And government should let everybody else also know that there is a problem with this plot. AgriBazaar, or for that matter, others cannot say, I know there is a pest, I will write it in my database on the top of the data which government gave with the consent of the farmer, but I will not tell government that a pest is going to come. I'll also not tell other organizations that the pest is going to come. So these questions will remain, sir, and they will have to be answered. You see, you put it in some obscure corner does not mean that you have discharged your liability. Say that more loudly. Make it more clear to people. Searching in a website is a hell of a job. So kindly tell that MOUs are there in a more conspicuous way so that what can be avoided should be avoided. ना सर, हमारा कोई इंटेंशन ही नहीं है और क्योंकि हमने कहीं कॉर्नर में डाला है तो लोगों को लगता है कि हम कुछ गड़बड़ कर रहे हैं.
I think we will leave further questions to the tea time.
We have Mr. Pramod here, who is the Joint Secretary, who is actually responsible for digital agriculture. So he will answer many of.
So maybe you can interact with Pramod. You want to say something, Mr. Jakar?
So I'm saying there is no tea time. You are offering them.
There is no tea time. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
No tea
So but 1 minute is, we have only 1 minute. So I think we will stop there and move over to the next session. In any case, there are so many unresolved doubts in the minds of the participants which need more clarification. So maybe, Mr. Jakar, you need to organize another session. Thank you very much.